On today's show, the Bucs aren't rebuilding, they're reshaping, and some fan favorites may not survive it. Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find us online, BucsReport.com. And the best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe or follow the Bucs Report on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. So in this edition of the Bucs Report, we talk about the off-season moves. I'm talking about that we've seen a change in the offense coordinator and now a change to the quarterbacks coach, that they didn't do the thing that I think a lot of people thought they were going to do and replace the head coach. But the one thing that jumps out to me in the moves that we have seen made is continuity, the comfort level with Todd Bowles and these new hires. And it makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. So let's just get into it. We're talking Buccaneers football. The Bucs haven't played football in a bit here, but that's what we do here. It's the Bucs Report. We talk Bucs football. So the biggest takeaway here is the Bucs are quietly building what I'm going to call a modern quarterback room around Baker Mayfield. And, when you zoom out on this Chandler Whitmer hire, the first thing that jumps off the page is that Tampa is not, simply replacing Thad Lewis. They're upgrading the way they develop quarterbacks. And just to kind of, if you didn't know, Whitmer just coached a Heisman winner and Fernando Mendoza and helped Indiana go undefeated and win a national title. That is not the small stuff. So when we talk about the moves that have been made, the additions, some of the names are familiar, the additions, and some of them you're like, I'm not really too sure who that is. Chandler Whitmer might not have been on your radar, but in this segment here, we'll talk about why I think he will be a good fit for the Bucs. A younger man, he is only 34 years old, basically in Baker Mayfield's peer group. And, that matters because he speaks the same language as today's quarterbacks. And, oftentimes you run into that where the coach is so old, whether it's the head coach, the defense, offense coach, whatever the case is, that it's a young man's league, right? And I think that sometimes they don't relate, or it sounds like grandpa talking to the grandkids, that I think it's beneficial and advantageous for the Bucs to have a guy like him, only 34 years old, because this isn't some old school clipboard guy. This is a rising young coach who has been modern offenses at Yale, Ohio State, Clemson, and with the Chargers, and most recently with Zac Robinson in Atlanta. See the comfort level that I'm talking about? It's oftentimes when you see changes in the coaching room, whatever coach we're talking about, it's new coaches from all kinds of different organizations. So to have that comfort level and that familiarity with him and Zac Robinson is huge. The connection to Robinson is everything here. Whitmer already understands what Zac wants in the passing game, how he teaches the concept, how he breaks down the film, and how he builds rhythm for a quarterback. The Bucs are clearly, in my estimation, trying to create, like I said, continuity, not just fill a spot on the staff. And like I say, this is probably going to be the last dance for Todd Bowles if they don't meet expectations. And I think that same goes for Jason Licht. So to have these coaches that are familiar, it seems like everyone is going to be on the same page That's exciting. So, but let's be real here. If Baker is going to take another step in this offense, having a sharp, detailed, up-and-coming QB coach, who understands both college development and NFL is a huge win for Tampa. So at the end of the day, I ultimately like this move. And, it makes sense. Like I say, maybe not, when we talk about, the offensive coordinator and the quarterback's coach, I think we all had our favorites, this sexy name or that well-known name. That I think that it will pan out rather well. So next, let's pivot to the man himself, Todd Bowles. And Todd Bowles doubles down on his guys. Because the biggest takeaway here right out of the gate is Todd Bowles is betting on continuity over change, even after a shaky defensive stretch. So, when we're talking about here is Bowles, what he did on his side of the ball, the Bucs had two big holes on the defense after Nick Rapone retired and Kevin Ross was let go. And instead of going outside, Bowles went in-house. He's promoting Tim Atkins to safeties coach and Rachaad Johnson to defensive backs coach. So, it's these things, these moves, that don't seem like they're too significant, actually have quite a bit of significance. Because why does this matter? Because Bowles knows these guys. If you have noticed, this is the theme of these new coaches in this podcast is familiarity, continuity, that they know the system. They speak the same language. They've been in that building for years. Akins has been with the Bucs for 7 seasons. Started as quality control, worked his way up, paid his dues. Rachaad Johnson, former NFL safety, has been in Tampa since 2022, learning under Bowles. So, the case is simple here, really. It's not too hard to understand. Bowles believes familiarity breeds consistency. He'd rather have guys who know his scheme inside and out and bring in someone who, might want to flip the whole thing upside down. Whether you love that or hate that depends on how you felt about this defense last year. So, I take a look at it. I applaud it. It's one of those things on paper I think will pay off well for the Buccaneers, but I guess time will only tell. And as I record this, I know we still have the Super Bowl yet to play, but I'm already thinking long ball here. Yeah, Dan's thinking long ball here. I'm thinking about next season and what is this Bucs team going to look like? Are they going to take steps forward? That's the big question. That sometimes things on paper, don't always pan out in actuality. But, that's all we have to deal with right now is what we know in front of us. So, that's the question. Is continuity a strength or a problem? We'll pivot to that here because, the biggest takeaway here talking about continuity as a strength or a problem is that Bowles is choosing trust over fresh ideas. And that could make or break 2026. He has, in a lot of ways pushed all his chips in on these players because, let's be real here, Bucs fans. This defense had issues, especially in the secondary. Passing defense has been a sore spot. I think we all know that. And some folks wanted outside voices, new blood, maybe a shakeup. And I think we will get that shakeup, like I said, if this team underperforms. But, it's a questionable move at the end of the day, trying to make moves like that. And, like this should work, that could work. When you know what's at stake for Baker Mayfield, things up in the air with Mike Evans, the rumblings out there about Chris Godwin, that there are a lot of loose ends when it surrounds this team. But talking about that continuity, instead, Bowles, looking at his staff, said, we're staying in the family. He is risk averse. He does not want to go outside of the comfort realm there, and ultimately why the Bucs made the decisions that they did. So the argument for this is actually pretty strong, though. These coaches already know the players. They already know the verbiage. There's not going to be that learning curve in a league where continuity is rare. Tampa is leaning into that rather hard. But here's the tension part, right? If the defense struggles again, And it very well could. People aren't going to question Akins or Johnson. They're going to question Bowles himself. He owns that side of the ball, and these are his hires. He's vouched for him. And when like I say, you're talking about Bowles. The only reason he's here is that he can pat his back and go, "Hey, look at when I was at the helm here, 3 NFC South titles, right?" And with these moves, the Bucs coaching staff is basically set. Aside from the offensive consultant role with Tom Moore, now it's all about the draft, free agency, and figuring out how this team gets better. That is the question. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about questions, rumbling surrounding Mike Evans, the future of Rachaad White. There's a lot to unpack. Thanks for sticking around. This is the Bucs Report. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network. Again, subscribe, follow the Bucs Report on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. You can also find this episode simulcast on the Bucs Minicast podcast feed, a part of the Fans First Sports Network. So let's keep going here, talking Bucs football and the man himself, Mike Evans. And, just thinking about him, thinking about his career with the Bucs and the possibility that he might try greener pastures. And when I mention the next team here, it's going to be like, greener, really, Dan? But people are drawing lines. They're drawing connections. I've heard rumblings about Mike Evans with the Bills. I've heard rumblings about Mike Evans and the Texans and why that would be kind of a no-brainer. But one here recently talking about Mike Evans and the team that is ugly and never seems to get better, the Cleveland Browns. So biggest takeaway here is the NFL world keeps trying to move Mike Evans, but Tampa, at the end of the day, still feels like home. And, oftentimes when you think about different players, it's about answering to the almighty dollar. This is just my take on Mike Evans. He seems like the guy that would like to be a Buck for life. And you've heard of that before, Lavonte David, these different kind of guys that I think that, Mike Evans, unless the Bucs did something horrible that, kind of rubbed him the wrong way, I could see him retiring as a Buck. So let's shift gears here because PFF threw a little gasoline on the fire saying Mike Evans' best fit in free agency, brace yourself, would be with the Cleveland Browns. That got a lot of people talking. And, there's a lot of teams around the NFL like that. Like, when is the last time they were good? And sometimes you think about it, you'll ask people at work, when was the last time the Browns were good? How about the Jets? You think it's tough as a Bucs fan. Imagine being a Jets fan. Imagine being a Browns fan. Just perennial loser year after year after year, and no real plan of getting better. I don't think there's a pot of gold at any of the rainbows that their fan base believes. So it's got to be tough. And then you take a look at the new structure going on in Cleveland. It's interesting. But anyway, the idea is simple. Evans could reunite with Todd Monken, right? That is the line drawn, and people like to search for lines when they can't see it. His former Bucs OC from 2016 to 2018 when Evans put up monster numbers. Now, my take on it here, that's a story. That's fodder for a conversation. If Mike Evans is going to leave a team, say he's going to leave the Bucs, for me, it's the Texans. I could see that for sure. Or the Bills. I mean, just the names that are out there. I think that would be a big thing, but I understand the familiarity. See, that's kind of the theme of this entire show is familiarity and the familiarity between Evans and Monken. But Cleveland would give him a chance to be wide receiver number one, a top tier defense, and probably more money than Tampa can offer. But yeah, I mean, that is where you're going to go to just a horrendous team. That would be a feel-good story. Don't get me wrong. I want the Bucs to win the Super Bowl, but if somehow, some way, the Browns, they could find a way to do something, that would be worthwhile, kind of fodder for a Disney movie. But here's the problem: the quarterback situation in Cleveland is a mess. Shedeur Sanders started late in 25. Deshaun Watson is still looming, and there's zero stability. Mike Evans really would want to have to leave sunny Tampa, indoor weather, and a winning culture for that. Plus legacy matters. And this is kind of what I'm leaning into here, is Evans has spent his entire career with the Bucs. He is a franchise icon. When you think Bucs football, when you think wide receiver, there's a pretty good chance that Mike Evans is one of the first to your mind. Walking away from that for the Browns feels unlikely, but that is the buzz out there. So all signs point to Mike Evans staying in Tampa for at least one more season. So next, let's pivot to Rachaad White, and this seems almost 100% certain that Rachaad White will be on the move and the Dallas fit. Now, Rachaad White is an interesting case for the Bucs. There was a time that he was perceived to be RB1 and things changed. It was Bucky ball, right? And he kind of supplanted Rachaad White. Rachaad White just never had what the Bucs were looking for, those violent bursts, those jigs that would get between. A lot of the skills that Bucky Irving has. So Rachaad White, I'm resigned to the fact that he has played his last game as a Buck. Of course, Rachaad White might be a better fit in Dallas than he ever was in Tampa. Let's talk about running back, because this one actually feels pretty real to me. Rachaad White has been dropping hints all off season that he is done in Tampa. He sees the lay of the land, right, with Tucker and also Bucky. Then he's like, where do I fit in here? I know who I am. Put me on the right team and I can be RB1. But especially, like I said, after Bucky Irving took over the backfield, PFF says Dallas is his best fantasy fit. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense. That White excels on specific run concepts: counter, power, trap, pull, lead. And guess what? The thing of it is, the Cowboys actually use those concepts at a high rate. So there is a chance that would be a good fit. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I wish Rachaad White nothing but the best. They also have one of the best offensive lines in football. And that run game has been effective. In Tampa, you take a look at White's role shrank. In Dallas, he could be featured back again, get more touches, and probably get paid more. So for the Bucs, this feels like a clean break. They've got Bucky Irving. They can invest elsewhere, and White gets a fresh start. The legal tampering period opens in March, which will be here a lot sooner than any of us think, and that's when things are really going to get heated up here. So yeah, Bucs fans, coaching hires, Mike Evans drama, and a likely Rachaad White exit. The offseason is already rolling, and we're just getting started here as, we got the Super Bowl on deck here and the many changes that will take place. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Antoine Winfield Jr. and how he really stood out at the Pro Bowl. And we'll talk about the big takeaway on PFF free agents, and also what is next for the Bucs. What other big moves can we expect this team to make? I'll discuss all of that and much more straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network. Check us out, bucsreport.com. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe or follow the Bucs Report on YouTube. Like the videos, comment anything down below. Let's get this channel huge. All right, let's keep going here, talking about Antoine Winfield Jr. And you don't need to convince me that he is one hell of a football player. One of the best, I guess I'm going to say, on the Bucs right now. And that's not just me talking. Let's talk about the man himself. Biggest takeaway, Antoine Winfield Jr. is still the emotional and physical heartbeat of this defense. And this Pro Bowl MVP reminds everyone of that. So, yes, Pro Bowl isn't what it used to be. And to be honest with you, I really don't like it, but that's just me. But you cannot tell me that moments with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and that one-handed interception did not feel very Bucs. Because take a look at it here. Winfield basically closed the game, if you didn't see it. And Micah Parsons losing his mind on the sideline made it even better. It's kind of crazy to watch the highlights. But this is now 2 Pro Bowl appearances and 2 interceptions for Winfield, including that pick six off Patrick Mahomes in his first one. And, looking at it, that is not a coincidence. That is who he is as a star player. He shows up big moments, even in these loose all-star settings. Now, look, last season in Tampa wasn't his all-pro year. We get that, but he still played in at all 17 games, made 93 tackles, forced a fumble, and was flying around the field. When Winfield is on, what do we know? He changes how offenses play the Bucs. If this Pro Bowl MVP gives him a little extra juice heading into 2026, Bucs fans should feel excited because when he is at his best, he is the best player on the defense. No questions asked. All right, next, let's pivot to the big takeaway on PFF free agents part 1. Biggest takeaway, Tampa is likely losing Jamel Dean. And this is going to sting. But what's the big thing on Dean is health. He has a hard time staying healthy. But it might have been inevitable. Dean coming in at number 5 on PFF's free agent list tells you everything you need to know. He graded 4th among all cornerbacks, allowed the best passer rating and coverage in the entire league, and has never posted a PFF coverage grade below 70 in 7 seasons. The problem is not his play. The problem is the price tag. PFF projects him at $55 million over 3 years with $35 million guaranteed. Basically Carlton Davis money, right? And the Bucs already extended Zion McCollum. Now, Dean took that pay cut last September, if you guys remember, to stay in 2025, but that moved his free agency up to this year. And honestly, that feels like the final chapter at Rachaad. Now, he loves Todd Bowles. He loves the system, but some team is going to back up the Brinks truck. And if you're asking me, goodbye, Jamel Dean. I mean, that's my big thing, the price tag and also just his inability to stay healthy, I guess you could say. Then you have Mike Evans at number 13. Which is fascinating. His 1,000-yard streak ended because of injuries, but when he came back late in the year, he still looked like Mike Evans. This is not a washed player in my estimation. PFF projects him at 1 year, $18 million with $15 million guaranteed. If this is just about money, Jason Licht will make it work for Evans. Now, the real question is whether Evans wants one more shot at a Super Bowl somewhere else. And that is what the Bucs fans and why they're holding their breath. Now, listen, I stand pat with what I said before. He is not the kind of guy, at least if you're asking me, that chases down the dollar bills. And I think, if there's a guy that could, most assuredly retire as a Buc, it would seem like it would be him. All right, let's keep going here. The big takeaway on the PFF free agents, but the biggest takeaway, Rachaad White is almost certainly gone, and Tampa is moving forward with Bucky Irving as the face of the backfield, because White comes in at number 43 on PFF's list, and honestly, he just put the best tape out there in a contract year. He cleared up the fumbles completely, had 0 drops, and graded in the 98th percentile on gap runs and 94th percentile on zone runs. That is what I'm going to call elite efficiency stuff. But, we all saw the shift in Tampa. Bucky Irving emerged, ran for over 1,000 yards. And became the spark of this offense. When Irving got hurt in 25, White stepped back and played really well behind a battered offensive line, but the writing is on the wall. Now, at 2 years, $11 million projected, some team is going to value him more than the Bucs will. I think that is easy to say, especially since he already said his goodbyes and was openly critical of Todd Bowles' defensive play calling. Deeper down the list, you have Lavonte David. At 180, he is 36. His play dipped, but the door is still open if he wants to come back. And honestly, you never bet against LVD. Cade Otton at 181 is interesting. He has already been steady, reliable, productive since 2022. And there is a real debate about whether Tampa pays him or lets him test the market. And then Haason Reddick at 229, which tells you how disappointing his lone Bucs season was. 2.5 sacks, missed games, not the Philadelphia version that we were hoping for, right? I think that's the case. So when you put it all together, Tampa is at a crossroads this offseason. Don't ask me what I think we're going to see from the Bucs this next season. I don't know. Am I cautiously optimistic? I think I'm going to push my chips into that basket. New offensive voices, key defensive pieces likely leaving, and a roster that is good, but not quite championship ready. And that, Bucs fans, is what makes this offseason so critical. You take a look at the coaching staff, it's pretty well set. It's what's in flux is the players that are going to be out on the field executing said plays. Listen, the Bucs messed up last year. There is no ands, ifs, or buts about it. And I'm kind of at the point right now where they're going to have to make me believe. And it's fool's gold, right? How well the Bucs started last year in the preseason, and then to start the season, the chance of Baker Mayfield being MVP were quickly dashed away when the bottom fell out. When all the players returned from injury, the Bucs actually played worse, if you can believe it. So we're hoping, fingers, toes crossed, that the Buccaneers take a step forward this next season. But at the end of the day, it's hope. We don't know. Mike Evans, Rachaad White, Jamal Dean, these kind of guys, what is it going to mean for the Bucs big picture? I guess time will only tell. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network, also available on the Bucs Minicast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. And I'll talk to you again next time.